Have you brought with you some of those devices which would have enabled the CIA to use this poison for?
We have indeed.
For killing. Don't point it at me. I wonder if
Mitch, can you roll that over?
Now, does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman.
And the dart itself, when it strikes the target, does the target know that he's been hit and about to die?
That depends, Mr. Chairman, on the particular dart used. There are different kinds of these flechettes that were used in various weapon systems, and a special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
Our story starts with Frank Church, a Democratic senator born in Idaho. He served in the U.S. Senate from 1957 to 1981. He was an intelligence officer in World War II and was chairman of the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. This committee was also known as the Church Committee, which started January of 1975. It was a response to the Watergate investigation, which was in 1973, which we learned from the Watergate investigation that the intelligence agencies had been carrying out constitutionally questionable domestic security operations, like the U.S. Army's program of domestic surveillance, the exposing of assassination attempts on foreign officials by the CIA, and launched investigations into agencies including the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI.
Now, in that document, you make certain recommendations with respect to changing restraints which you thought had been placed upon intelligence correction. Is that right?
Yes.
In making those recommendations, did you believe you were representing the consensus of the entire working group that had worked on the study for yourself and for the President?
Yes.
So that whatever recommendations you made with respect to illegal opening of the mail or burglary or surreptitious entry were ones which you believed represented the views of the entire intelligence community, with the exception of the footnotes of Mr. Hoover himself. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, you did recommend, did you not, that the United States should commence, in your view commence, as you understood it commence, or recommence, the illegal opening of mail. Is that correct?
Yes. It was, my understanding from my contacts with the Bureau and through the Working Committee was that in the past that this had been a technique that had been employed, particularly.
Back to the Church Committee, that was a 16th-month investigation, which was 126 committee meetings, 40 subcommittee hearings, had 150 staff members, 800 witness interviews, and uncovered a lot of the facts we know today, which were unknown to the public and to Congress at the time. Now, I'm going to name some of the things we learned about. These are going to sound pretty familiar to anyone who likes conspiracy theories or this kind of government stuff, and that's Quintel-Pro, Project Mockingbird, Project Marionette, Project Shamrock, MKultra, and MKNaomi. The committee's final report was published April 1976. It totaled almost 3,000 pages, and although much of the documentation related to the report was classified, the committee defied the wishes of President Ford and released a summary of the findings. The reports that the Church Committee released remain one of, if not the most, comprehensive disclosure of abuses by the American government, specifically the intelligence agencies in American history. So during the hearings of the Church Committee, we learned of the development of a so-called heart attack gun. It was part of the CIA operation MKNaomi, which was used to develop chemical and bioweapons. According to a FOIMA, or a Freedom of Information Act document on the CIA website, it gives a summary of MKNaomi. Quote, MKNaomi Another major CIA program in this area. In 1967, the CIA summarized the purposes of MKNaomi to provide for a covert support base to meet clandestine operational requirements, to stockpile severely incapacitating and lethal materials for the specific use of TSD, Technical Service Division, to maintain an operational readiness, special and unique items for the dissemination of biological and chemical materials, to provide for the required surveillance, testing, upgrading, and evaluation of materials and items in order to ensure absence of defects and complete predictability of results to be expected under operational conditions. Under an agreement reached with the Army in 1952, the Special Operations Division at Fort Detrick was to assist the CIA in developing, testing, maintaining biological agents and delivery systems. By this agreement, the CIA acquired knowledge, skill, and facilities of the Army to develop bioweapons suited for CIA use. The SOD developed darts coated with bioagents and pills containing several different biological agents, which could remain potent for weeks or months. SOD developed a special gun for firing darts coated with chemicals, which could allow CIA agents to incapacitate a guard dog, enter an installation secretly, and return the dog to consciousness. When leaving, SOD scientists were unable to develop a similar incapacitant for humans. SOD also physically transferred to CIA personal biological agents in bulk form and delivery devices, including some containing bioagents. In addition to the CIA's interest in bioweapons for use against humans, it also asked the SOD to study use of bioagents against crops and animals. MKNaomi was terminated in 1970. On November 25th, 1969, President Nixon announced the use of any form of bioweapons that kill or incapacitate and ordered the disposal of them. So he renounced the use of them and ordered the disposal of them. And that was supposedly the end of MKNaomi. And then what's interesting about this forma doc is it talks about the agreement between Fort Detrick and the CIA in 1952. And we'll elaborate on that with a really interesting but sad story. So the CIA and Fort Detrick Special Operations Division, SOD, as we learned in the last doc, had an agreement which started in about 1952 to work on these bioweapons. The CIA and Fort Detrick's SOD had formalized an agreement with the new NYS Psych Institute for 2 years, $1 million. And it was stated in a January 1954 CIA memo, and it was uncovered 46 years later by cold case prosecutors in New York. The memo provided details about the relationship and included the fact that the SOD's contract with the NYSPI was established for the purposes of developing bioweapons that could be targeted at people. And the quote from it is individuals for the purpose of affecting human behavior with the objectives ranging from temporary minor disablement to more serious and longer incapacitation to death. So yeah, some pretty nasty stuff. And we actually have a case where this went wrong. So this is the sad part of the story. In 1953, Henry Blower, a 42-year-old tennis player, sought treatment at the NYSPI for depression following a divorce. And without his knowledge, he was used as an experiment in this project. And he was ultimately killed because of it. He was tested by doctors Paul Hodge and James Cattell. They subjected him to multiple injections of large doses of a mescaline derivative, and the doctors didn't even know the ingredients. Cattell reportedly told Army investigators, quote, "We didn't know whether it was dog piss or what it was we were giving him," end quote. After receiving the fifth and final injection on January 8th, 1953, Mr. Blower began sweating profusely, flailing his arms. His body stiffened, and he frothed at the mouth. He lapsed into a coma and died 2 hours later. The doctor's written report for the injection was that it was for diagnostic purposes and failed to mention the experiment. And it was covered up. And eventually it was uncovered 20-something years later. And May 6, 1987, the New York Times actually published an article about this. I'm not going to read through the whole article. I'll link to it. But basically, the judge made the government pay to the family for a wrongful death suit. And yeah, it talks about how the Army secretly used them in a chemical warfare experiment, and he didn't know. And the government covered up the facts, and it's a very sad situation. Very sad. And, it's a shame that the government does things like this. I'll just leave it at that. So we learned a little about where the experiments kind of started with MKNaomi and the money. So the question is, and we even saw about how they talked about a dart and chemical agents. So the question is, how do they have a gun that produced a heart attack? I want to remind you that the document said they couldn't produce darts that could incapacitate and bring someone back to consciousness. They didn't say they didn't have a gun with darts that could incapacitate someone. A CIA employee, Mary Embry, was hired by the CIA when she was an adult teenager. She worked as a secretary and at one point worked in the audio surveillance department, and she was later tasked to find a poison that could kill undetected, and she did find it. And we'll watch some footage from her.
So I had to find, one time they wanted me to find out if there was such a thing as a poison that was undetectable, especially one that seemed to mimic a heart attack, that would kill someone, but it would appear that they had a heart attack. I did find such a thing. So when it reached the person, it would melt inside them, and the only thing would be like one little tiny red dot on their body, which was hard to detect. There wouldn't be a needle left or anything like that in the person.
But also the toxin itself would not appear in the autopsy?
Yes, so that there was no way of perceiving that the target was him.
The shellfish toxin met the criteria, and work began in the laboratory at Fort Detrick. Researchers mixed the shellfish toxin with water and froze into a mixture into a small pellet or dart, and the finished projectile could be fired from the modified Colt M1911, and it was equipped with an electrical firing mechanism, and it could be effective at a range of 100 meters and virtually noiseless when fired. It would also not leave a dart behind, and it couldn't be detected in an autopsy. It could truly go undetected. So this is what they wanted. And what's interesting is there's no real way of knowing if they used it. We can't find anything left behind because it just kind of gets rid of them. And so there's no way of knowing if anyone actually died from this. The committee also investigated alleged sanctioned assassination plans targeting leaders such as Cuba's Fidel Castro, Patrice Lumumba of the Congo, and Rafael Trujillo, dictator of the Dominican Republic. All of these were independent of the gun, but we know the CIA needed ways to take out Cold War rivals without getting too much heat, too much publicity. And we know the CIA attempted some weird things on Fidel to kill him. So there's no confirmed use of the gun, but we went over why that could be. We also learned that Dr. Gordon, against the orders of Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, sorry, definitely not how you say it, Gottieb, the elusive head of the MKUltra project, had a secret stash of 5.9 grams of shellfish toxin, nearly a third of all the toxin ever produced. He had it stashed in a Washington, D.C. laboratory. One thing that's interesting is KGB hitman Bohdan Stashniski. I'll put the name on screen. Had a similar, cruder weapon that he used with success. There are many cases of alleged poisonings by the KGB. And we know that through some defectors, there was poison used by the KGB that could go undetected. I think BuzzFeed Unsolved did a video about someone who they couldn't prove it, but like the KGB had used radiation to poison someone. So the KGB hitman had interesting, weird weapons as well. And so, no surprise, we probably had them too. The CIA, as reported by the CIA director at the time, William Colby, said the operation on the gun was never complete, and they never used the gun on a human. And we don't have any recorded use of the gun. Again, this is the CIA, so take that as you will. As I was researching and I was reading about Frank Church, I came across a very interesting quote, almost a prophetic quote. And it was about the NSA, and I'm pretty sure it was in 1975. He said, quote, "That capability at any time could be turned around on the American people, and no American would have any privacy left. Such is the capability to monitor everything. Telephone conversations, telegram, it doesn't matter. There'd be no place to hide. I don't want to see this country ever grow across the bridge. I know the capacity that is there to make tyranny total in America, and we must see it that this agency and all agencies that possess this technology operate within the law and under proper supervision, that we may never cross that abyss. That is the abyss which there is no return." 1975. Not nearly the privacy violations we have today with the technology we have access to. He warned us. He warned us for sure. We should have listened.